What's the circumstances behind your murder charge?
I lived at Jarvis and Dundas, but my building was connected to George Street. The crack epidemic was at an all-time high at those times. All the players that I seen in that environment were drug dealers, pimps, robbers, killers. When you're a drug dealer, that leads to many other things. No matter where I was, I always thrived. When you're in a certain type of hostile environment, you got to thrive in that environment.
I meet a lot of people that don't have any clue about what it means to get caught up, what it means to come from an area where crime is prevalent, and as a youth, you're sucked in.
I just started realizing slowly that the game is bullshit. It's just whack. Somebody that I thought was with me, he ended up setting me up to get robbed. And when I ended up getting robbed, literally 24 hours later, somebody ended up losing their life.
And you were incarcerated for murder.
I was, yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of Who Judges the Judge, the podcast. I am here today with Christophe Lewis. I'm so excited for this episode. Christophe is a real estate investor. He is a social worker. He is the founder of Freedom is a Must, an incredible foundation that you're about to learn a whole lot about, and a lifer. He is serving a life sentence after being paroled after 13 or so years.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about your entire journey, which has been nothing short of incredible, turbulent, struggles, successes. Your story has it all.
Most
Christopher,
definitely.
thank you so much for being on the show, first and foremost. It's great to finally meet you. I feel like I've been connected with you virtually for many years. Interviewed you for Keep Six organizations. They were doing a speaker series, so I remember interviewing for that. And your interview just stuck. You're so well-spoken. You have such an incredible understanding now of the system from the inside and the outside. And you're just so hell-bent on trying to change and make things better for your community in a way that I don't often see. And it's really incredible.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here on your platform. I appreciate it. Yeah, it feels like it's been a long time coming.
It has.
I mean, I'm in awe of the work that you do as well, too. So, thank you for all the kind words, but I'm in awe of the work that you do as well, too. Knowing your story or a little bit about it, it's intriguing to me, too. And I'd love to have you on one of my platforms at some point in time, too.
Anytime. Anytime. Sure. You tell me. So let's start with Freedom is a Must.
Okay.
Tell us about the foundation, how it got started, what you're doing with it. It's really incredible work.
I've been doing a lot of mentorship work whilst I was incarcerated. So this journey didn't start just, a few years ago. The Freedom is a Must Foundation was registered 2 years ago officially, but I've been on parole now for about 3 years. And the Freedom is a Must Foundation to me is a catalyst to basically show that people that have made mistakes can overcome them. No matter what type of hardship you've been through, you can overcome. And our mission is to just provide a safe space for at-risk youth, provide them with mentors through advocacy, education, and so on and so forth. We just want to make sure that the next generation are able to be partnered up with people that have made mistakes and have turned their lives around to become better individuals. It's kind of like a restorative justice type of give back to the community type of vibe,
That's amazing. And is it independent or are you working within the court system?
Well, I'm hoping that I can start connecting with people that are in the legal system per se.
Okay.
I do loosely work with people that are connected with their correctional services, but these are like cultural advisors and regional, ethnocultural supervisors and things of that nature, but not specifically with the correctional services, like per se, like not direct institutional heads, let's put it that way. But people that work and do programs within the system.
Okay. And so you started doing some of this work while you yourself were incarcerated?
Yeah.
And you were incarcerated for murder?
I was, yeah.
Okay. Can you tell? I know, it's interesting. You are.
I am. I'm still incarcerated.
You're still
literally,
incarcerated.
Yeah, partially free, right? So
yes.
That's what I like
You're
to refer to myself as, yeah.
But you will be on parole for the rest of your life.
Yeah, pretty much. It's sad to say. I mean, unless we could get lawyers like yourself to fight for some type of actions to be able to be done where these things can get overruled in court and people that have made mistakes, those type of people can get their lives back eventually.
Right.
because I believe that people shouldn't be judged by their mistakes alone. They should be judged by all the contents of their character, right? So yeah, I'm partially free. I'm still serving a life sentence. So yeah.
Wow. And you wake up with that every day, knowing that you are still technically incarcerated, although on parole. Because a lot of people don't understand. Like, a lot of people think like life sentence is really only like, 10 to 25 years. And after that, you serve your time and it's done. But it really isn't. Like, a life sentence is a life sentence.
It's a constant reminder. And your case management team, which consists of your parole officer, their supervisor, and essentially yourself. So the person that's on parole is actually a part of their case management team.
Okay.
But your parole officers don't usually tell you that. But when you read and learn more about it, you realize that you're actually a real big part of that. You're constantly reminded by them that, hey, you're doing a long sentence, you're doing a life sentence. So they kind of like beat it into your head, I want to speak on some things that come along with that. But we'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
What landed you the life sentence? What was the situation that resulted in your murder conviction?
So for me, I grew up in an area, downtown Toronto. Just got caught up in the subculture of what's going on in the area.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
Because I meet a lot of people that don't have any clue about what it means to get caught up, what it means to come from an area where crime is prevalent, and as a youth, you're sucked in.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand that background. And for those of us either in the criminal justice system or who have come from that world, it's like, how could you not understand? But people don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what did that look like for you? Did you come from single parent household, both your parents? Like, what was growing up like for you?
So I did grow up in a single parent household.
Okay.
Both my parents are here in Canada. Just that my dad didn't live with me. He had another family.
From how old? Like, how old were you?
So I came to Canada. I'm originally from Jamaica. I was born in Jamaica. I came to Canada when I was 5.
With your mom?
No, with my dad.
With your dad?
With my dad and my aunties and a couple. So I was separated.
Okay.
That's another thing.
And your mom was still in Jamaica?
Event. Yeah, exactly. So I was separated from my mom, came to Canada. Then once being here, I lived with other family members, my aunt for a year or 2. And then my mom came to Canada. When she came to Canada, then we started to, we got a place and we started, we moved around a few times until we were stable and we ended up moving downtown. If anyone knows, I lived at Jarvis and Dundas, but my building was connected to George Street. If anybody knows George Street, that's one of the worst streets in Canada. I'd honestly say it is the worst street in Canada.
Yeah, it was. That's where Seton House is. It's
311 Jarvis, Seton House, Fillmore's. And that street is just like a nightmare for people. A lot of people don't want to walk
prostitution. And what year, what year is this?
Yeah, so
we're going back to the 80s, 90s?
I ain't that old. I mean, it was 1995 I moved down there.
Okay.
You could just imagine what was happening in those times. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't a pretty place.
Yeah, it was crack and prostitution.
Oh yeah, for sure. Drugs, prostitution, the crack epidemic was at an all-time high at those times, 95, 96. And then that's the segue that led me to end up going to Regent Park, because there's something called zoning. I think I mentioned it to you last time we spoke. Because you have a postal code that is in a certain area, you have to go to school in certain areas.
Right.
This is a systemic issue. It doesn't afford everyone equal rights, I would say. And that's what led me to be forced to go to school in Regent Park. My mom didn't want that because she knew what was happening in that area. Not to say that everybody in Regent Park was a bad person, because there's good people everywhere. It's just that the community as a whole is just struggling with a lot.
Well, Regent Park in the 90s had not yet been bought by Daniels Corporation. It was not revitalized. It was divided on gang territories between North and South.
Yeah, and rumor has
I started high school at Eastdale Collegiate.
I know Eastdale. I went to Eastdale Alternative School, right? I went there for a little while too, yeah.
Yeah, so I started my high school, which in 1993 at Eastdale Collegiate. I was there for a year and a half. And so learned completely about the culture and about sort of just the way things went, where people were, what they were expected to do and what life, was expected to be and how it played out. And so So you're drawn into that 95, 96. How old were you?
So 95, 96, I was, I guess to put an age on me, I was, I would have
If it
been
makes you feel
11.
better, I'm 45. I don't.
No, it's all
I
good.
don't hide my
I'm just
age.
saying that. I'm just playing. It don't matter to me. I'm an open book. No, it's, I think I was at the time 10 or 11.
Okay.
Yeah. Just being there, having to walk through all that mess to go to school, to come back from school. You're seeing a lot of things. Like, to give context, I'm walking on Dundas Street,
Okay.
all the way to Parliament.
Yes.
So I have to pass through Sherbourne and Dundas, all those places. Like Sherbourne and Dundas is another infamous place, right? It's one of the worst streets intersections in Canada. I had to navigate through all of that, and I always had like a strong personality, full of drive, full of vigor. You know what I'm saying? So no matter where I was, I always thrived. When you're in a certain type of hostile environment, you got to thrive in that environment. So essentially what I did was exactly that. I thrived in that environment that I was in. And it just so happens that all the players that I seen in that environment were drug dealers,
Yes.
pimps,
Yep.
robbers, killers. And what people don't understand, there's a domino effect. When you're a drug dealer, that leads to many other things. You have to build on certain type of skill set. You know what I mean? You have to learn how to defend yourself. You have to learn how to count money, put your money together, stack your bread, save your money. You have to put in hours. You gotta, it's a real job. It's not just like, oh, you just get up and just, money just falls from the sky. It really doesn't work like that. And to be frank, I feel like people that sell drugs, they're working, it's a different level of hardship. You know what I mean? Because they got to look out for the cops. They got to look out for, and don't get me wrong, I'm not, trying to glorify it or make it look like in any way that a drug dealer's job is harder than the average person working. I just want to point out that it wasn't a bed of roses,
Right.
So I had to navigate all that. But it's the thing is that those same skills that I learned as a drug dealer were transferable skills. And that's exactly what I teach the next generation now. I'm like, if you were a drug dealer, because a lot of time in my day job, I work with youth that are at risk, that are already incarcerated. I tell them, listen, just because you were selling drugs and you have a criminal record now, it doesn't mean you can't come back from that. I'm like, you're essentially a Fortune 500 CEO. You just don't know it. You know what I mean? Like, and they're like, why would you say that?
I love that.
How am I a Fortune 500
It's true though.
CEO?
It's all the soft skills.
Exactly. They're all transferable skills. Like, you deal with insurance. You have to insure your product. You got to deal with security. You got to secure your product. You got to deal with financing to make sure that you got your re-up money straight. You got to make sure everything is straight. You got to deal with transportation. These are all things that CEOs have to manage and navigate in the corporate world. You essentially have the same skills. And that's essentially what I end up having to do. Use those same skills now to navigate the nonprofit world and get into developing with my colleagues in the West Coast. So that's just what, was a segue for me. And it wasn't an easy transition. I ain't going to lie to you. That was one of the hardest transitions I've ever had to make in my life, is transition from the street life to the corporate world.
There's also the element of fearlessness that I used to do a lot of talks to youth who were either in the shelter system or in various rehabilitation systems. And I would go in and lead like small group training. I did one for women who were trying to escape sex trafficking. And I was always asked, how do you function with all of this baggage? I was like, I don't have baggage. For me, I look at all of the shit that I've been through. Those are tools. The fact that I overcame, the fact that I got out of the streets, the fact that I, even graduated high school, then university, then law school, like the strength that I needed to do to accomplish those things, coming from where I was coming from, like those are all tools. And one of the greatest tools for me, I didn't even realize until I was already a lawyer. And I was a very, very junior lawyer. And I'd be sitting in court and I would have colleagues that I was in school with, or people that, were the same age as me. And they would say, I'm so scared to go to court. Scared.
PTSD?
I was on the streets at 16 years old. Yeah. That was scary. Going into court, no one's going to kidnap me. No one's going to rob me. No one's going to beat the shit out of me. Like, I'm okay in court. I don't feel that fear in anything I do, really, because nothing will ever be as frightening to me as what life was like back then. And that's a skill that a lot of people don't have. that are starting out in places that you and I would think of as being more advantaged. You know, the people in the world that have those advantages, you know, financial advantages, familial advantages, advantages of like a network that, you know, we may not have had access to, they don't have that skill set that allowed us to navigate and succeed in that world. And so I've always tried to like teach, you know, the youth that I mentor to stop thinking about your life as, you know, being a series of horrible incidents that resulted in baggage that you now have to carry. They're horrible incidences that now produced skills and tools, and what you carry is instead a toolbox. And when you rejig the visualization for people, sometimes it like they really get it.
I think it's two things that stick out to me from what you just said, but I think it's important for youth to understand that the youth having to navigate the system and, you know, going through, one of the things I wanted to mention was that when you talked about privilege, there's this misconception that the privilege means, okay, you know, just people that are of a certain color or race means that they have privilege. I mean, I grew up in a melting pot. You know, the area that I grew up in, there was every ethnicity. It's the real melting pot. There's black, white, North, South Asian, there's everything there. And some of my closest friends, white dudes that were poor, that had the same struggles as me. So it's just, I think it's, when I think of culture, I think about just where I grew up, you know what I mean? Not just my ethnic culture, where I'm from originally, my genetic makeup and so on and so forth. I think of more just like the people that I grew up with around, you know, because we're all in the same struggle. But then what happens is we become divided. And then that's why we're so easily conquered, because everyone looks at, oh, you have more privilege, you're this, you're that. But when I think of a story like yours, I'm like, you done went through the flames too, you know what I'm saying? But just in a different way, right? And you navigated it and you made it ahead. You had to put in obviously a lot of work, and here you are, right? So, I mean, I could appreciate that as well, you know? It's important for people to understand that, you know, because a lot of people don't see things that way. They see it as, okay, well, you know, this set of people, they have all the tools, everything. The problem is that things are disproportionately worse for other people, and that's a fact.
Absolutely.
I mean, so as a Black man, I could say that things are disproportionately more difficult for me to navigate because I have so much more barriers. But everyone has barriers. Everyone has hardships. Life is not easy, and that's just at the end of the day what it is, you know. So,
I mean, I think those are the things that make us stronger. But
true.
Okay, so you're navigating the world of becoming a drug dealer. And at what point do you enter the criminal justice system? Like, do you go from 0 to 100 and immediately get arrested for the first time for murder? Or is there stepping stones in between?
No, I started navigating the justice system at an earlier age. I would like to say that it's just circumstances that led to that.
Okay.
Like, I'll give you a short example. And when I speak publicly about this, I talk about the fact that one doesn't know how they can get caught up in the justice system. It can happen in so much different ways. I usually give this example. When I was going to school, I ended up getting kicked out of different schools. So I schooled Lord Dufferin Public School, then I went to Winchester, then I ended up going to Earl Grey. These are all schools in the downtown core kind of area.
Okay.
One day I lent one of my classmates or school friends, I lent him my Walkman. People that know what a Walkman is, it's, you know, a little thing that used to walk around with.
Did you have the yellow Sony Walkman?
No, I didn't have that one. I had,
okay.
It was the blue one, the blue and
I
gray
had the
one.
Yellow. Yeah.
Anti-shock, but always skipped anyways. You know what I mean? That one. So I lent my homeboy my Walkman and my headphones, and he lent me his Game Boy.
Okay.
So he went home. I went home. Didn't think nothing of it. His parents asked him, "Where's your Game Boy?" He's like, "Oh, I lent it to Chris." Da, 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 da. They call the police. The police come to the school the next day, and they just started harassing me. Like the way it was, they just started accosting me, just basically accusing me of stealing or robbing him for his Game Boy. Without even, like, I said, listen, it's here. I bought it from him. You know, ask him. But he's shook now because his parents are all on him, saying, "Yo, look, you know, this guy stole his our son's Game Boy." Da 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 da. And long story short, I ended up getting charged. That was my first interaction with the justice system. I ended up getting charged for robbery and possession of stolen property. And then it was a domino effect after that.
Did you plead guilty?
I didn't plead guilty. I can't remember what it was. This is a long time ago.
Did you go to trial?
No, I don't think I ended up going to trial. I think there was a plea agreement, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember 100%.
Kills me. I had the same thing. I was charged twice.
Actually, it was
when I was
311
16.
Jarvis. So back then, I think if I might have
you
went
probably
to
did
trial,
some
but
diversion program. Maybe you had to do some
and I ended up
community
going
service.
exactly. I ended up going. I think that's what led me to going to Casada Rexdale. There was open. What do they call open custodies?
Okay.
So I ended up going there, and then I ended up going to 311. I ended up going to 311 Jarvis first, and I went to Casada Rexdale after.
Okay.
So I don't know if those places still exist. Open custodies.
So open custody does still exist. Casada Rexdale does not. And 311 Jarvis, which was for the longest time, for those who are listening and aren't familiar, was the youth court for Toronto for many, many years. And it's now collapsed into the Toronto court system because all of the courthouses in Toronto, there were 5, are now in one facility. Other than we have a bail remand center, which
so
is separate.
311 Jarvis doesn't exist anymore?
Correct.
That's wild.
These are just Old City Hall, Scarborough Courts, Thousand Finch,
Old City Hall courts done?
All done. They're all at 10 Armory now.
I didn't know that.
So everything has been, all of the 5 Toronto courthouses are now consolidated into one courthouse.
Okay.
Yeah.
So interesting. That being the segue to how I got caught up in the justice system. After that, it was just like a repetitive thing. So every time the cops would see me now, I'm fearful.
Right.
I'm feeling like, yo, I don't want to.
Well, you're also on bail. You're also on probation, I'm sure, back and forth, in and out.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if I end up catching any cases in between those times.
Okay.
I think that I end up catching cases after that.
Okay.
I think I navigated the system. I'm not sure if I even got bail for that first case, but if I did, then I would have just, I end up dealing with the matter, and then I have a conviction.
Right.
So now I have this conviction. So now fast forward later on in life, I end up going back to school downtown at Lord Dufferin. I end up graduating junior high at Lord Dufferin before I went to Central Tech High School. Shout out to Central Tech. And then I just remember my first time like getting beat up was by the police. I was on a lunch break, and the police, they said they were looking for someone, quote unquote, looking for someone, and I matched the description.
Of course.
They ended up wanting to talk to me, and I was like, nah, bro, like, what are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? I'm going back to school. So I ended up walking away from them to get over here, and boom, 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 boom. Next thing I know, I have a bruise under my eye, you know what I'm saying? And I didn't even get charged for that. They just realized that it wasn't whoever they're looking for, and I went back to school. But I remember having a black eye from that, and that was one of my interactions that kind of steered me in a certain type of way. It was almost like, some fuck the police type of vibes. I mean, it's always been like that because the community is definitely does not look at the police as any savior. We look at them as the ops, so to speak.
Right.
They're,
But that's because they do things like what you've just described.
Exactly.
In unprecedented numbers.
Exactly.
With no recourse. And so, a lot of people will question why there's a community that hates the police, but nobody really wants to understand why that is and where that comes from. And it comes from things like what you've just described. Oh, you're a black man and you've got a shaved head and, a small goatee and you fit the description. Well, what does that mean?
100%.
You fit the description of hundreds of people out there that, without any specificity.
You could be a black guy with just with hair on your head, and then the description could have been a black bald guy. It doesn't matter. They're still gonna, you're a black guy, so whatever.
How old are you when?
I think at that time I was around. No, this is just before. So this would have been like around, I'd say about late 12, maybe 13.
Oh, so you're in junior high when this happened?
Yeah, just about to be going to high school.
Wow.
Right. So if I remember correctly, it was in my last like grade 8.
Okay.
Grade 8 or grade 7. I think it was grade 8. And then, so I mentioned that because that was a domino effect. So now every time I see the police, I don't want to interact with them. I'd rather, if they try to get my I'm running away from them. If I see them going that way, I'm going that way. It was just one of those type of situations. And then before you know it, every time now you can, that's one charge right away. Evading the police. I don't know what do they call
Resisting
it?
arrest.
Resisting arrest. It's resisting arrest is always a charge that you get. it was almost like mandatory that you get that with whatever else you get.
I'm laughing, but it's not funny, but it's
facts.
It's so true.
Yeah, because we're never resisting.
Right.
Like, why would I resist 40 people with guns? You know what I mean? Like, why would I do that? It's like, that's stupid. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, I end up getting a lot of charges like that. And then what happens is that you end up having this long rap sheet that's just a bunch of foolishness. And now you can't, you try to get a job. Everywhere you go, people are like, oh, you have a criminal record, you're this, you're that. And not only that, the police are harassing you left, right, and center, especially when you're living in those type of areas. So it's like a domino effect. It's a spiral, right? And once you get caught up in that spiral in the middle of it, it's really hard to get out.
So you get caught up. You start selling drugs.
Mm-hmm.
How old?
I started around the time of high school.
Okay.
Because I ended up like, not wanting to go to school no more. I felt distracted, having to travel far to school. I had to pass through all these different places. I'm seeing all these things. And one of the things I always talk about is that the community pillars, the people that I've seen in the community that were glorified in that community were like the people driving the big cars. All the community pillars would like, the OGs of the hood, the women in the neighborhoods, they would offer them water, offer them a drink. But the young bucks, get away from my porch. We don't want you around here with your this and that. But we're getting work from those same OGs, you know what I mean? So then when we see them now, we're looking up to them. We're like, yo, we got to become like them. So we get that same level of respect, right? And that is just a vicious cycle because we end up thinking that that's who we have to be. That's who we have to emulate to become somebody, because those are the people that we look up to.
Right.
So I end up just navigating life like that, thinking that that's what I have to do and that's where I have to be. And school started to look boring to me. You know what I mean? Started selling drugs. Them times phones came out. I had that Nokia, the little rectangle joint. You know what I mean? Then I got a StarTech. If you remember all them phones. You know what I mean? Flip Motorola and all of the chirps. So I end up just being, and having a phone back in those days was a big deal. You know what I mean? So it was almost like keeping up with the Joneses. I always felt like I had to keep up with the Joneses, and with the phones now, I could do my dealings anywhere. So I had customers and clients that were meeting me at school. So I would leave on my break, or I go to the bathroom and go serve a customer and go back to class. Before I know it, I'm like, I don't want to be in class no more. So I end up just going and getting into the streets full time. I hid it from my mom for a long time, but she kind of figured it out after a while. But it was already too late. I was so deep in the game.
Right. And that ends when? When did things come crashing down for you?
I knew that I started to see the game was whack, you know what I mean? And it wasn't worth being involved in, but Was
it worth it financially? So for some of my clients, it's very much worth it. Like some of my clients that sell drugs, it's very much worth it financially. And others, they get arrested, they lose everything. They lose it all. I'm like, what did I just spend all of this time and effort and risking my life, risking getting shot, risking getting arrested? And like, usually it comes crashing down. The way that I see it is with an arrest, right? Police knocking on your door, and that shoebox that you've taken, 2 or 3 years to build up, is now gone because the police have taken it. And 9 times out of 10, they're not actually recording what was taken. So it really is lost. It's the police have now stolen it.
Oh, for sure. So, I've had a lot of those things happen to me.
Yeah. So I see a lot of people that realize like it's not worth it, but they have to decide what they do with it. When you realize it's not worth it, is it lucrative for you still?
Well, now, definitely not. You know what I'm saying?
Not now, but like at the time. You're in high school, yeah.
Oh, for sure. Because at that time, I was making money hand over fist. I wouldn't want to put a dollar amount on it because I don't want to sound like I'm glorifying it. Right. But I was making really good money. Okay. You know what I mean? I was making tens of thousands of dollars, every couple of weeks, I would say, So for me, I felt like this is life-changing money. I have everything at my beck and call, having a nice car at 16, driving a European car at 16, it was a big deal, right? So I was the guy. So I wasn't even looking that deep into it, I was just thinking about just some living for the now. And I just started realizing slowly that the game is bullshit. It's just whack, like you start, when you go to prison and you realize, when you go to jail and you realize that when you're doing shorter sentences, it's not that big of a deal because you're there with all your homeboys, you're there with people from the neighborhood that you know, and you kind of just click up and you just kind of do your time. But then when you go on the long stretches, that's when you realize who's really there for you. That's when your family has to travel. Because now in Canada, you get a pen sentence, you could end up in Vancouver, you could end up in Donnacona in Quebec, you could end up all these different type of places. And you realize who really cares for you, who checks for you when they're going to travel 13 hours, driving, or 8 hours to, 5 hours to go to Kingston. You understand who really cares for you. And you also realize who really didn't have your best interests. Some of your so-called quote unquote friends are trying to sleep with your girlfriend, or, like messing up your money, out there flossing off your money when they should have been flipping it, making something out of it. So you start to realize that there's so much things that are messed up with the game. In hindsight, you look back, you're like, man, I wish I did this. I wish I'd done that. But I try to find a silver lining and just look forward into what I went through and how I could use that as a transferable skill to better myself now, so.
What's the circumstances behind your murder charge?
One of the things that come with when you're involved in that type of lifestyle, you're a target. As I said, I was making a lot of money at a young age. And people actually thought I had a lot more money than I did because, I used to floss hard, be in the clubs every day, whatever. So you attract a lot of negative attention. Wearing $100,000 worth of jewelry as a kid, literally I was a kid, 16, 17 years old. When I really started pushing hard in the streets, I attracted a lot of negative attention. A lot of people didn't really mess with us, but there was always somebody that's willing to challenge you, And long story short, somebody that I thought was with me, he ended up setting me up to get robbed, and I ended up getting robbed. And when I ended up getting robbed, I'm not going to go into all the gory details, but literally 24 hours later, somebody ended up losing their life. And it was just because of all that, So it was just, yeah. And if the thing is that if you don't defend yourself, then somebody else is going to come and rob you. It's just like if you go to school and you have lunch money and somebody takes your lunch money today, tomorrow when you go to school, your lunch money, they're coming back for your lunch money again. You better fight. Even if you win, lose, or draw, you better fight for your lunch money that first day, because the next day you might have to do the same thing over and over and over again. So long story short, yeah.
How much did you get robbed of?
It was more than $100,000.
Okay.
I'll say that. And there was narcotics, a large amount of narcotics, and a large amount of cash. So, and this was in 2005, the year of the gun, to put context into it.
Okay.
So,
and the guy that robbed you got shot and killed.
Yeah, he was a known dude in the streets out here, robbing people and killing people. So I realized that it was my life against his, or my life or his, and I'm like, it ain't gonna be me. So I had got the drop, and whatever happened, and he ended up losing his life. You know what I'm saying? So it's sad because it's not something I'm proud of. I'm not proud of a lot of the things that happened to me in my neighborhood. I'm not proud of them, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we're just perpetuating the same negative vibe and negative energy that the system kind of wants us to perpetuate, you know what I'm saying? So that revolving door of prison just keeps working. So the prison industrial complex keeps feeding itself. And a lot of the OGs, I must say this, a lot of these OGs, quote unquote OGs, they're out here spreading the wrong message. They're not telling the next generation, the young boys, that, hey, yo, bro, like you might end up losing your family. You might end up, getting murdered. You might end up not being able to, when you get out, even if you have money, you might not even be able to move into a certain area because the housing boards, the homeowners associations won't allow you to be in that area. You can't get insurance on certain high-end cars because you have a criminal record. They don't tell you these things because, one, most of them don't even know that because they've never really had to navigate that themselves. But they utilize the young boys or the young generation to do all kind of nefarious shit that they won't even do themselves. I just think that's when I start to realize that the game is so whack. Like, these older heads are just utilizing the next generation to do shit that they would never even do. You know what I mean?
At what point, and maybe it was right away, but probably not, like you get arrested for this murder. How long after the murder happened?
The murder happened in 2005. I got charged in 2010.
Okay, so it took 5 years.
Yeah, but I was navigating the system for other serious charges
in the meantime.
In the meantime, because Murphy's Law, when things start to go bad, everything goes bad. It just gets really rough. And I was navigating the justice system on many different fronts.
Did that murder make things worse for you on the streets or better for you on the streets? Like, did that increase your clout?
It depends on how one wants to look at it. I won't look at it as clout now, but back then it would just be like people would know, listen, if I go for this dude, I have to go full force, because at the end of the day, he's willing to die for his, and he will, he has tentacles to take me out, and he'll do it himself, but he also has a long arm that stretches across the city, so at the end of the day, people will think twice, but at the same time, people will always test you. The baddest man can get tested. It's just the way it goes,
And so today, I know that you have some regrets. Like, I know today you wish you hadn't been a part of that situation. Back then, when that happened, did you feel like that? Did that change you, or that was a part of the life that you were living and you just sort of keep going? I'll put it to you this way. Like, I've represented a lot of clients on murder charges. Some of the clients that I've represented who have killed people, it changes them. They cannot live with the grief. They cannot live with the guilt. They feel horrible about the situation. I have other people completely on the opposite side that even after the case is finished, they feel like what they did was completely 100% justified and would not have changed a single thing. So I've represented and met people, and they're totally different situations. I've had clients that have killed their best friends over a small bag of meth. And I had clients that killed someone who was a pedophile and harassing girls, and who obviously feels no way about that, although the law obviously has to stop vigilante justice. So, I've seen all sides of that scope. Where do you situate yourself?
That's such a loaded question, and it would be a loaded answer for me to give, because I'm thinking to myself, I sit on many different sides of the spectrum when it comes to that.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if I'm going to choose my life or someone else's, I'm going to choose mine.
Right.
Always. And I think you would. I think anyone would.
Yes.
It's just the way that we are as human beings. It's just fight or flight, and you got to make sure that you live to see another day. Am I remorseful? Of course, because I feel like whenever there's life lost, it's a negative thing. It's a bad thing. It's somebody has to, sing sad songs. And I just don't want that to be my family, because I've been through it. I've been shot. I've been through multiple different situations where my family was, singing sad songs. So if I had to do it over again, in terms of defending my life, in the moment, I would defend my life. But in hindsight, I could look back now and be like, there was circumstances that led me to get into that situation. So I would have navigated my life differently, so I wouldn't have to fall victim to those circumstances.
Okay.
Right? And that's what I do with my mentorship now. Showing the youth, I'm one of those OGs that's showing them like, yo, look, this is what can happen. You ain't going to hear this out there because people are trying to get you to sell dope for them. They're not going to tell you that this is what's going to happen. And this is the domino effect. A lot of these young boys are inheriting beefs that they don't even know what they're inheriting. A lot of young boys they have like turf beefs where they're beefing with someone. They don't even know why they're beefing. It could just be that somebody back in the days, some guy slept with some other guy's baby mother, and they end up beefing, but they told him, oh, he robbed me. And then now the whole turf has been warring for 20, 30 years.
Wow.
So think about that when, you get caught up in the system. I always tell these young boys, you don't even know what type of beef you're inheriting. It could be over some bullshit, some fuckboy shit that you shouldn't even be getting involved in. And if you knew, you'd be like, I'm not riding for that. So, all I'm saying is that at the end of the day, none of that is worth it. There's no money that was worth me getting arrested and having to navigate the justice system for, 20 plus years now, and now serving out a life sentence. I literally have to be a submissive robot if I want anything done. And I'm not a submissive robot. I stand up and fight for my rights, which I'm sure you know.
Very much so. And actually, something that I want to touch on before we wrap up and our time dissipates on us.
Yeah.
You went from, or I shouldn't even say you went from, while being an inmate, you also became a complainant in the justice system or victim in the justice system. You got jumped by a number of guards. You got pepper sprayed by a guard when you were doing absolutely nothing wrong. You were standing in a room refusing to be strip searched by a female correctional officer, which means you were in the right because no one of the opposite sex should be conducting strip searches. There's rules and regulations about that. So you're in the right, and you are asserting your right to not be subjected to a strip search by a female guard. And this entire interaction is caught on CCTV footage. And so you are not being aggressive. You are not assaulting anyone. You're not a threat to anyone. You are surrounded by white prison guards when one sticks his arm out on camera and pepper sprays you.
There is a lot more context to it too, right? There was the words that were, the slurs that were being used that led up to that, not even just in that incident, but before.
Right.
Like, this is something that was clearly premeditated to me.
Okay.
Right. And
this is at Millhaven.
This is at Millhaven. This is right after I got convicted. Another thing that the OGs don't tell you is what it's going to be like if you end up getting caught up in the system, which is inevitable. You will. Living that type of lifestyle, you're going to get caught up in the system. But, you know, these quote unquote OGs are not telling the next generation, yo, you're going to have to navigate certain places where there is no black guards. There's no one to come and save you, to help you. I mean, things are changing a little bit now, but back in those times, there was no black guards in Millhaven, any of the Kingston jails. There was zero black guards. Like, you were by yourself. And not to say that if there was black guards or anyone that looked like me, it would change anything, because it's an environment, and they have to kind of like stick together, so to speak, right? To me, the pepper spray was the least of it. There was so much more that sticks in my mind. Just thinking about how, like, I felt helpless, that there was nothing I could do. You know what I mean? Like, knowing that these people could snuff my life out from me. It was difficult, you know, to have to endure that. And as you know, it's before the courts, so I can't really speak on certain specifics. But I'll just say that I've had favorable decisions handed down because of this. And I just say that everyone needs to learn how to utilize the system in their favor, because it's there for one to utilize.
Well, you stood up for them. You fought for that CCTV footage for a long time.
I did.
How long did it take you from the time that incident happened, in which you are pepper sprayed, to actually receiving the footage of what had occurred?
I received the footage in 2019, and it happened in 2012, to give context.
So 7 years you spent fighting to get the footage. You get the footage eventually. And how long after receiving the footage did that officer face charges?
2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in 2023, convicted.
Right. Exactly.
After trial.
Roughly, yeah. 2023, yeah.
And so you had to testify at trial?
Unfortunately, yeah.
That
was a weird ass experience.
What was that like? Like, you go from being deeply entrenched in the culture in which you don't speak to police.
No,
like, it's
still
a rule. You don't speak to police.
No, I still don't. Man.
And yet, you knew that if you didn't, this would just keep happening.
So for me, it was difficult to navigate dealing with all that when it comes to like the court processes, because, as I said, the street life mentality, the gangster mentality, it paralyzes you from getting justice in the courts, because no man wants to go up on the stand. At least any real person that's from the streets doesn't want to go on the stand. But I realized that I had to at least speak out about this situation, about my overseers and my oppressors, because if I didn't, then they would continue to perpetuate the same type of nonsense on others. So the shit that I was seeing inside was a lot worse than what was happening to me. So I had a little bit of leverage, and I used it, which was speaking out about it. And, you know, I end up, my legal counsel is the one that did everything. I didn't call the police. I didn't do any of that type of stuff. My legal team was the one that reached out, and they came to see me at the jail. And the way that they did it was super sneaky. You know what I mean? I didn't even know that they were coming because they always looked at me as, you know, the other. They didn't look at me as one of them in any way. You know what I mean? I was a victim essentially, but they didn't treat me like one. You know what I mean? It was bare accusations and why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that, or why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? Like, it was almost like, okay, whatever. So I realized that there's nothing going to be fair about the whole process. So, but I do recommend that people go out there and stand up for their rights in a legal way. And if not for nothing, the correctional services should be thankful that someone like myself can learn how to start utilizing the system as it's supposed to be used in a proper way, right? I didn't go out there and start to, you know, when I lash out at the guards or do this and that and the third, I just utilize the processes that are there to get justice, quote unquote. And I think that they should be happy with that, because at the end of the day, I know my people are, because I didn't perpetuate the same shit that would have got me more time. I didn't start wilding out on the guards and doing things like that, which would have got me more time inside, right?
Right. It's an amazing journey, it's amazing what you've done with it. It's amazing the strength that you have to pull out of that entire lifestyle and now not only want to help yourself, help your family, be an example to the community, but also to be a mentor. And the fact that you now want to teach other people the lessons that you think would have saved you from all of that hardship is truly, truly incredible. So, Chris, how can you tell people how to find you? Where are you? If there's someone out there, and I suspect there's parents out there that want you to speak to their kids, because I know I speak to a lot of parents that are like, how do I make sure that my kid does not end up as one of your clients? And there's only so much my voice will carry,
right,
but I think your voice will carry so far in helping other people to not go through the pain and the suffering that you went through. Because at the end of the day, that isolation, that anger, that sadness to be away from the people that you love in the world that you really want to be a part of, like, guys don't talk about that amongst themselves, but I get those phone calls every day. Miss, you got to get me out of here. Miss, you got to get me out of here. I'm good on range, but you got to get me out of here. Well, if I got to get you out of here, you must not be that good. Even if you're comfortable, it's still not good.
They're never really comfortable.
No.
They'll just say that they're comfortable just because it's like, yo, I'm good, I'm straight.
Yeah,
they're
okay. They're not getting beat up and they're not getting extorted. But at the end of the day, they're also not, they're not with their girlfriend. They're not with their wives. They're not able to hug their mom. They're not able to eat the food they want to be eating and living the life and going to the gym when they want, as they want. So at the end of the day, it's never as good as they need it to be in that conversation. And I know because I get those calls. So for anyone who wants to connect with you as a mentor, as a teacher, as someone who really wants to interrupt this cycle, what's the best way to do it?
Well, people can find me at freedom_is_a_must.
Okay.
That's just my personal page. Or they could go to Freedom is a Must Foundation at Instagram as well. That's our Instagram page. I'm on LinkedIn and stuff too, but not too big on there. But they could find me at on Instagram. I would say one of the things that I want to point out is that don't wait till it's your youth or your family member that's caught up in the justice system before you want to try to advocate for change, because this can happen to anybody. Someone can break into your house and you defend yourself and you end up in prison, right? This does happen. And then you don't want to be frowned upon. You don't want to be judged by, your few mistakes that you've made in your life. Stand up now for what's right, opposed to when it only affects you and your family. Don't wait for that situation to come up. But, people could find us at freedomsofmustfoundation.org as well. The Freedoms of Must Foundation is a nonprofit federal corporation that operates across Canada. We mentor at-risk youth across Canada, working with different organizations. We try to provide advocacy, mentorship, and through pairing them with different people that have been through the system, that navigated the system and came out on top, to make sure that the next generation doesn't have to fall victim to the same situation. But people can reach us at freedomsofmustfoundation.org, Instagram, Freedom is a Must Foundation, or my personal page is freedom_is_a_must.
Amazing.
At Instagram.
Amazing.
Thanks for having me, Jordan.
Chris,
I really
thank you so much for being here. Honestly, I love your story. I think what you've overcome is so phenomenal, and you're just such an incredible, incredible example of someone who does not possess the character of a criminal that society associates with them, and you're really coming out in such a strong way to show the world that that is, your reality. Well, thank you for being here.
I appreciate you. Thank
Appreciate
you guys
it.
for having me.
Thank you. Another episode of Who Judges the Judge, the podcast.